Hi, I'm Paul Spangenberg. Me and my family run Nightsire Handmade. It's a small family-run business where we do woodworking and some art and many things like this, but in this particular instance, I'm here to pass my knowledge of woodworking on to you. I use relatively simple techniques that anybody can master. We don't get anything real fancy, but we come out with some very nice products, and we're here to show you how to do it. Alright, today what we're making is a toy race car. This is a relatively easy build, and we're going to use 3/4 inch oak in the middle. We're going to put 1/2 inch pine on the outside, and we're going to sandwich those together. Those come to 1 3/4 inches wide. So if you want to just use a regular stock piece of wood or something like that, that's fine. It comes to 1 inch high and 1 3/4 inches wide. You need about a 12.5 inch piece. The pattern will be below this video, so you can make sure you have all the pieces the way you're supposed to have them. Alright, so I'm sandwiching the 3 together so that it looks like a racing stripe, because I think it's cool looking that way, and I really don't like to paint things. I like to keep things very natural, and it gives me a very nice natural stripe right down the middle. You could use any wood you like, and you could make it wider if you like. Making this car a little bit wider, not a big deal. So if you have different dimensions of woods that you want to try to use, go for it. It's not a big deal on this pattern. I am ripping everything right now to 1 1/8 inches wide, so that after I glue, I can take that one nice edge, make sure one edge is nice and clean, and then I can take that clean edge against the saw, rip it down to 1 inch, and get it all nice and pretty. As you can see here, we've got our oak and our pine on the outside, and we're going to get ready to sandwich those together. Sandwiching the woods together, and I'm pretty sure sandwiching is the technical term, but I could be wrong, but it doesn't really matter, does it? So all we're going to do is we're going to put glue on the contact sides. We're going to put that on. We're going to get a nice level contact with, I'm just going to use my finger, and always make sure you have an old sock, an old t-shirt, something like that. You can get fancy and buy shop rags if you like, but everybody has old t-shirt or sock you can use to wipe your finger off. I'm using an old sock. You can see they get kind of rough after you use them for a little bit, but heck, they're going in the garbage anyway. Give them another life before you use them, right? So get that full contact glue all the way across, and you just need a couple of simple clamps for this. And if you don't have a couple of simple clamps, it's not a big deal. You could just use some painter tape or masking tape, heck, electrical tape for that matter, if that's what you got, and just hold it together nicely and let it set. So what we're doing is just making sure that we have at least one nice edge that is just nice and smooth and put together, because that's the edge we'll put against the table saw later to make it the right width. And I'm just feeling for it. I'm wiping off some extra glue, and I'm just gonna sit there and kind of feel for, okay, where's this need to be, because you can put levels and stuff across it, but running your finger across there and feeling where the bumps are is the best way to go, in my opinion. What matters is you wind up with a piece that's straight and flat, at least on one side. If you notice, my ends are not exactly even up, and I really don't concern myself with that too much, just because I'm going to level them out on the saw anyway. No matter if they were even, I would still take them to the crosscut saw there and level them out. And I don't remember if I said it, but it does take about a 12.5 inch section of wood to do. And like I said, I'm using 2 different pieces. I make more than one car at a time most of the time, so it's not a big deal for me to have a little bit of extra laying around. Alright, as you can see, they're all nice here. They're all nicely glued up. We're going to wipe off any excess glue. We're going to make sure that everything's looking good. And, read the directions on your glue. My glue says 20 minutes setup. And that's pretty good. You let it sit for 20 minutes and it's good. Now we're going to take that up and we're just going to, just like I said, we're going to take that and just shave off that end and make it all nice and square. So it's all pretty. We're going to do that to both ends. It's nice just to, just move that in just a little bit where you shave it off. You don't want to waste a lot of wood. Alright, so now we're going to, just like I said earlier, we're going to take that good side of the wood. We set the saw at 1 inch. We're going to take the good side that, is nice and flat, and we're going to take it to the saw and make sure that other side is just exactly 1 inch. Alright, so now we're going to cut our first pieces. We're going to need a 1/2 inch piece. That's going to be the back, the one that supports the fin in the back. And especially on those smaller pieces, because you can't see where this thing pops out of the way and it's not a big deal, but I can't see that from where I'm at. So wait till the saw blade stops. Get a little bigger pieces, you don't have to worry about it as much, but it's always a good idea, even though I don't do it sometimes, it's always a good idea to wait till the saw blade stops when you have a piece on the other side that you actually need. Last thing you need is for it to be in the wrong spot and that blade kick it. Alright, so that's 1.5 inch piece. And then we need a piece that's 6.5 inches long. So we got the 3 pieces here. That's going to be the body, the cockpit, and the back that supports the fin. That's what those 3 pieces are going to be. All right. Now we're going to start making the rest of this stuff. I'm over here at the bandsaw, and you could hand saw this out. I don't envy you if you do, but it is possible. It's just a big no for me. I kind of like my power tools. So we're going to take the cockpit piece, and we're just going to go from edge to edge. Sorry, I didn't get that on camera, but I'll show you here in just a second. Right there. Just edge to edge. No big deal. Okay? Then the cockpit, we're going to go 2 inches in. We're going to go 1/4 inch from the bottom there. We're going to connect the dots. And you'll see here later when we put this together how that all works out. But trust me, it does work. So it's right there. Just 1/4 inch to 2 inch, connect the dots. We're going to cut that piece off. Now if you notice, I have a piece of plywood under top. That's because most bandsaws have a little drop in the blade there, and I'm going to be using small pieces. And it just helps you get a nice, smooth surface to work on. Do what your bandsaw needs you to do. Read your instructions. Work the way it's supposed to work. It just gives me a nice, smooth surface to work on. Because most of the time, the little drop plate that's under the blade is a little bit lower than the rest of the plate, and that can make a difference when you're doing small pieces. All right, so my big old hand is in the way here. But what we're taking is we're doing that cockpit piece, and we're just cutting everything right down the middle. If you're doing more than one car, you now have 2 cockpits. Now, I like to do it this way because the chances of me messing one of these up when I'm sanding can happen. As many of these as I made, you gotta form it by hand when you're sanding it, and so sometimes you need a second chance. It happens. Those are 1 inch by 1.5 inches. And here we are, we're going to measure and drill the piece for the little man. By little man, I mean it's going to be a 1 inch dowel cap, a little 1 inch ball. And I'm just finding the center. What I like to do is 1 3/4 inches, right? So I just put it at the 1/8 inch mark on each, and then I can just mark right on the full inch. Whatever you do, you just got to find the center. Measure in. Find the center. All the measurements, you don't have to remember them all. They're all on the plans below the video. Alright, you do not need a real deep hole here. I'm going to drill this probably deeper than I need it. I always do. But it's not like it's a big deal. You just need a little bit for that dowel cap to sit in there to make it look like the little guy. You see the well-worn piece of wood underneath it. That's a backer board. Don't really need it in this instance. All right, now we're going to sand those pieces that we just got. First off, this is that little dowel cap I was telling you about. I call them dowel caps. It's just a little round piece of wood. This is a 1 inch round, and all you got to do put a little glue in there, and just put a little short piece of dowel rod. The particular one that I have is a 3/8, has a 3/8 hole. And so you just take a piece of 3/8 dowel rod, stick it in there. It doesn't have to be long. If you feel like you need more sturdiness there, you can put a longer piece. But the glue I use dries to 200-pound test. It's going to be fine. All right, so we're starting out. This is the back part, the little back part for the fin. And all we're going to do is we're going to sand those surfaces. That's all we're doing right now. Now, the spots where you cut on with the 2N grain, you're not going to sand those. You do not want a chance getting off of level on that, because that's the part we're going to glue together. All right, now we got the body of the car. We're going to start by sanding the surfaces there, and I'm using my little trusty cleaning stick there to clean my belt up. If you don't have one of these for a belt sander, I highly suggest you get one. You can find them online. You can find them at most stores. It's called a belt cleaning stick in most places. Little chunk of rubber that helps get all the sawdust off your belts. It will extend the life of your belts dramatically. So we're just sanding that. And what's nice about the pine on the outside of this is pine's a bit softer, so the pine sands really nice and smooth, and it sands fast. That's what's kind of nice there. The oak doesn't sand as fast, but it all looks good. So what I'm doing is I'm keeping it level, and I want this race car to look nice and sleek. So that's where I like the belt sander. You can do this by hand. You can get a sanding block. You could do it with a hand sander. You know, it's not imperative that it stay level. It's just going to look a lot better if you do. You know what I mean? All right, so we're going to the top. Now we're going to be shaping this top here in a second, but we're going to start by getting all of the surfaces nice and smooth, and we're going to get that angle nice and smooth too. Yeah, just make sure you keep this straight. This is the part that really will help on your aesthetics, making sure you keep that straight, because this is what you're going to see, and it's going to give you that nice profiled front end for the race car. All right, so at this point, I'm just rocking back and forth on that point, and I want to bring it down to where it's smooth, because race cars don't have a lot of geometric angles. You want to make sure it looks, you want to smooth that out. So you start with that angle, so you've got something to work with there. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the front end. I'm going to take the front end on that belt, and I'm just going to kind of round it out. If you need to do this by hand, do it. Sanding blocks are great if you're doing it by hand. You can do it with a hand sander, whatever you like. But see, this is what we're looking for. Something kind of nicely rounded off. If you need to finish it out with the hand sander, you can finish it out. I'm sorry you can't see that there, but I'm just sanding that thing nice and smooth. Sometimes, especially on the small pieces, the belt sander will kind of especially with oak, kind of burn it just a little bit. So you want to make sure that you don't have any of that on there, and the hand sander will give you that nice little finish, or hit it with actually just hand sandpaper and there. So that's what you're looking for, that nice rounded look where it's going to look like it's a nice sleek race car. And if you want to, you can make this a little sleeker if you like. Not a big deal. All right, back fin piece. First off, it's end grain. To glue end grain successfully, you need to rub some glue into the grain, and you watch that glue just disappears right into that end grain. We're going to do that to both sides, because both sides are going to be glued. Trust me, do not skip this step. This is, if you do, you have a high degree of that thing popping off. The end grain does not glue well unless you do this. If you do this, it's just as strong as everything else. All right, so I'm just taking that and I'm just rubbing it across the belt just a minute. And all that's doing is getting any extra glue that didn't get wiped all the way in, making sure it's smooth. So now we're going to glue this back fin piece. We're just going to put some more glue there, spread it out nice and even. I mean, look at me getting it right there in the camera for you. And just put that right on the back, just right there. I mean, you cut it out of the same piece of wood, so everything should line up beautifully, but just make sure that especially that oak down the middle, just lines up nicely with everything. Throw a little bit of a clamp on there. And again, you could tape this down if you don't have clamps. It's not too big a deal. All right, we're going to let that set. All right, this is the cockpit piece. Now, you start out at 1 inch high. You're going to end with this thing being about 3/4 of an inch high. Because first we're going to get those surfaces sanded. And this is where this gets a bit tricky. There'll be a pattern down below for you to follow if you like. I think it's best just to shape this piece right on the sander, but I'm also very comfortable with my sander. If you're not that comfortable with it, you could initially shape it on the bandsaw or something like that. Let's see. Okay, so first what we're doing is we're rounding that top off because we want that nice sleek look for the cockpit. I think it's called the cockpit. That's what I'm calling it. It's the piece that's right behind the driver. I'm not a car guy, I'm a woodworker. So just rock it back and forth on there. And again, you can do this by hand or a hand sander. You don't need a belt sander. I just really enjoy it because it's a lot faster and I can control it a lot better. All we're looking for is those nice smooth rounds. All right, now the fun part. So we're going to taper this thing back, right? And we're going to taper it back to just about where that oak meets it. And we're just going to rock that back and forth. And again, I'll have this on the pattern for you if you want to draw it out and follow a line. I've just made 1 or 2 of these. Yeah, and then you got to match the other side, which is sometimes the trickiest part, and that's why you have an extra one. Because if you mess up that first one, you can go grab the other one and just do it too. That's why I said that you have a high degree of messing this part up, because you can, oh, I sanded this side too much. I'm going to go ahead and sand the other one to match it up, and then you wind up chasing both of them and not making either one. So you have that extra piece there. Because sometimes you just need it. So all we're doing is just kind of just rounding that out. And we're losing some width on the outside of that too. So this is going to be slightly less wide, not as wide as the rest of the car, which is about what it should look like. So that's what I'm looking at right there. So we're just going to round both of those and make them look perfect. Or at least as close to perfect as we think they are. Keep in mind, if it's not exactly perfect, you're probably not going to notice. As long as you're really close, you're going to be fine. So now all I'm doing is I'm just cleaning up those edges, rounding everything off nicely, because like I said, no sharp edges on a race car. And just everything's get nicely rounded off. For smoothing things out, nothing beats just a hand sandpaper. Just sanding by hand. You're not going to get any sharp edges that way, because your hand is not sharp. Your hand is soft. So you're going to get a soft edges when you use it this way. It's just the way it works. Take your time and make sure this piece gets right, because this is kind of one of those pieces that make it look like a race car. Now here's what we're going to do. Okay? We're going to just dummy fit that guy in there. See, there's our little guy. He's going to look like a little guy. Then we're going to make sure this piece fits. Because if you don't sand that, if you leave it the exact length that we cut it at, and it doesn't lose any length in sanding, it won't fit. It's designed to lose size while you sand. So just put those in, make sure they fit. All right, now we're going to glue this piece on. And this piece, it really can't be clamped. There's no way to really clamp this. And it is fine. It is very strong even without the clamp. Just make sure you get good surface area contact, and you got plenty of surface area there to contact with. All right, so we're going to put this on here. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the oak in the middle to line everything up. We're going to line it up in the back. We're going to line it up in the front. This is where your preference comes in. You can put it right up next to the guy. You can put it right up next to the fin. You can put it in the middle. As long as you get it in there where you think it looks good, that's what's going to matter. I like to put it up next to the fin. And now we're going to get our little guy glued in there. A little bit of glue in the hole. And put a little glue on the outside of that dowel rod. Put it right on in there. Now what I like to do is, when you see these things, they have the grain of the wood. So if you make the grain of the wood go across, you get that little round patch in the front. And it kind of, for me, it's kind of like the face. Now you can get fancy and draw or paint a face on here, things like this. This is a very customizable car. So we're going to let that set while we work on the tail fin. For the tail fin, you're going to need a 2 1/4 inch long piece. Let's get that cut up. And again, if you're making more than one race car, which you can very easily with this pattern, this is going to make more than one fin. All right. The saw is set up with a fence. Okay, I don't have the fence for this saw because I bought it on a clearance sale, and it's a great saw, but it didn't come with a fence. So I have a piece of wood that is now my fence. It is set up at 3/16 of an inch away from the blade, and you're just going to nice and easily, if you've never done this on your bandsaw before, just take it easy, take it slow, and it comes out nice. My big old hand's in the way, I'm sorry. But you're going to wind up with a piece that's 3/16 inches. You can do this on the table saw if you like. I like doing it on the bandsaw because the blade is thinner and I don't use as much wood. But what matters is you have a piece that's 3/16 wide. So while I'm over in this area, I'm going to go ahead and get the holes drilled for the axles. Because, get that thing done while you get a chance. And don't ask me why I stopped on the fin to do the axle holes, but I did. It doesn't really matter as long as it all gets done. You can do this later. I wouldn't do this last. I would do this before you put the fin on because it's a lot easier. You can do this when you first do the initial setup. Okay, but it's 1/4 inch from the top. And then I forget the exact dimensions from each side, but they're on the pattern below. And just like I said, I like those brad point drill bits. There's the handle of my drill press. Gotta love that. And I like the brad points because you can line up just beautifully right where you need it to go. And that backer board stops it from splintering out on the back. So you have a piece of board on the back that is basically a sacrificial piece. I mean, you can see it's well used. And that stops it from splintering or breaking the wood as the drill bit comes out the other side. If you have a really sharp drill bit, that shouldn't be an issue to start with, but things do happen. Just use a little sacrificial piece of wood there. And there you go. See, no splinters or anything like that. So now those are done, and we can take care of that. Here, real quick, what we're doing is we're just going to go ahead and finish up the final sanding on this race car before we get that fin on. And this is where the belt sander or sanding block is really nice because you can come through and get everything all leveled up. If you missed something a little bit or the clamp moves something, you can fix it here. Sandpaper fixes everything. Okay, almost everything. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come through and I'm going to clean out the sides of the holes there a little bit so that you don't have any. There's really almost nothing there, but it does help to kind of just run a piece of sandpaper in there for a second. Make sure you don't have any splinters or things that might, little pieces. Just smooth it out just a little bit. Usually the spots where it goes in is all nice and sharp. All right, so we're going to come in here with our sander, and I'm just giving them some nice round. For one, this is a toy for a child, so you don't want any sharp edges. For two, it's a race car, and like we talked about, race cars don't have sharp edges like that. So we're just going to come through and we're just going to round off all the edges and make them nice and pretty. This would also be a good time if you wanted to take the front end and taper it down a little bit more. If you wanted that look to your race car, you could easily do that. Just don't come back any further than where the axle goes. But we're just going to come in here, get everything nice and rounded up, get the sander in there where we need it. And you don't want to round ahead of time before you put those pieces on, because if you round too much, then the piece don't fit well. So you want to do this last. This does take a minute to do. Take your time. Get this right the way you want it, because this is what's going to really make the difference in making your car look nice. You got to make it nice and smooth. It's a race car. And again, no matter what you've done with the sanders, nothing replaces the fact that you can just come in here with the hand sander and just with the hand sandpaper and just kind of make it all nice. Now, always sand with the grain. I don't do a good job of reminding people of that, but you always sand with the grain. You sand across the grain, it's going to look rough. Unless, of course, you get to end grain, then end grain you can do that because there is no grain to sand with. All right, the fin. If you're not comfortable with what you're doing here, then hand sand it. I'm very comfortable with my belt sander, and what I'm doing here is I'm just using a piece of scrap wood. It's actually a piece of poplar off another project, and I'm using that to hold that so it doesn't fly off my sander, and I'm just giving it some gentle pressure. And the reason we did 3/16 wide on this piece is we expect to lose that 1/16 of an inch while we're sanding it nice and smooth, and so it's going to come out to right about 1/8 inch thick. Again, if you're making this for a smaller child, or if you wanted a bit sturdier, stuff like that, you could easily make this a 1/4 inch piece, 1/2 inch piece. It will affect it, just won't look as sleek on the car, but if you feel like you need something sturdier, go for it. There's no rule on this one. It's not going to affect anything on this build. All right, so now we're going to do the sides. We're going to get all the sides all sanded up, and then we're going to round each one of the corners. And I like to start from the long side and just kind of give it a little flip around. Like I said, I've done this once or twice, so if you're not comfortable with this, do it with a hand sander. Do it with a sanding block. It's not hard to do, especially with the pine on the outside. Pine does sand nicely. It's a softer wood, so it sands beautifully. It's a great one to work with. We don't really have like, oh yeah, let's make this round. I will have it on the pattern exactly how round I make it, things like that, and it'll be there for you. But you don't, I mean, as long as it all looks nice and uniform, it's not a big deal. But the pattern will be there for you. That's your fail-safe right there. And now we're just going to round it each way. Make sure there's no sharp edges. Anytime I'm making a toy, I round it much more than I would anything else. When it comes to regular household items, I just basically relieve the edges most of the time. But when it comes to toys, I give them a nice round because we're talking about children here are going to be playing with this. So this is what we're looking at when we're done. We just got a nice piece, beautifully sanded. It's about 1/8 of an inch wide, and we're going to get that attached to our car. All right, so we got the car here, and we're going to get some glue on here. And again, spread that glue out so you get a good contact surface. You want to make sure it's nice in contact. And if you do this and you have a nice contact surface, you shouldn't have any glue squeeze out to have to go wipe this thing out off of this thing. There's going to be plenty. Now I'm trying to find a good way to angle on the camera here. Hang on a second, I got it. Okay, here we go. All right, so what we're going to do is we're just going to eyeball this thing right in the center. It's a real easy thing to eyeball in there. Once you put it on, you'll realize it's real easy just eyeballing. If you really need to measure it, or if it makes you happy, then just measure it around and make sure it's good. But get it clamped in place and let it set. We're halfway there. All we need is a little bit of finish and some wheels. All right, I thought I hit record when I was putting the finish on this car, but I didn't. So basically all I did was put a butcher block conditioner on it. It's a food grade finish, and when I'm dealing with a child's toy, I like things that are food grade. I just, sometimes they wind up in little mouths, and while yeah, you shouldn't be teething on your race car, it just makes me feel better to have something that I know is a food grade finish. I put the bare piece of wood unfinished next to it so you could see the difference. Just that little bit of wiping on that little butcher block conditioner, and you can find those in almost any home store, hardware store, online. Get something that you like. You can also, this is where you would paint it. If you're going to paint it, get it all nice and painted. I also like to finish the wheels. This is something that some people do forget to do, and it's a nice touch. Put the finish on the wheels. And you can see I'm trying to get in that little crevice of the wheel. By the way, that is a sock again, yes. It's a sock that I use to put that on. That is a very well used sock. Get a clean sock, wipe off the excess, and you can let it sit for a little bit if you like. If you want it to soak in a little more, it's really not necessary. It's going to take what it wants to take pretty quickly. You can let it sit, but you're just going to come back and wipe off the same amount later. All right, as far as axle length, that's going to depend on the wheels you get. These are 1 1/4 inch wheels, and I forget the exact width, but I think they're right about 3/8 wide. And every wheel you get from any manufacturer, or wherever you get them from, or if you decide smaller wheels, bigger wheels, the width of the wheels are going to change. So take the wheels, put them up next to the car, stack them up on top of the car or something, measure, add about 1/8 of an inch, and dry fit things together first. Put it together dry, and then take it back apart and make sure that it all fits the way you like your axle to fit, and cut it, change it the way you need it to change. Do some experiment. Don't cut both axles first. Only cut one to start with. Make sure it's the right length you need, and then cut the other one. It's a 1/4 inch dowel rod, by the way, because these particular wheels have a 1/4 inch hole, and most of them do. Okay, so I got some glue inside the wheels. I'm taking a nail. This is high quality, this is some high quality, high tech stuff, right? I'm taking a nail and I'm smearing the glue around the inside of the hole so we get full contact all the way around. And as you see, you got some glue that comes out on one side or the other. That's one nice thing about waxing it first, because that glue just comes off nice and clean because there's wax on there. But remember, there's no wax inside the hole. That's why the glue sticks. Don't get wax inside the hole. All right, go ahead and get your first axle set. I'm just using my little homemade hammer here. Got it far a little too far, so just putting that axle back down. Use whatever hammer you have. Heck, you can use anything that can be used as a hammer. It doesn't matter. It's just so long as the wheels get on. I like my little wooden hammer because it doesn't mark things up, and it's just a nice thing to use. All right, get both of the wheels through there. And I like to take the other 2 wheels and just kind of basically just set them on top. And that way I can now get both of them in. Now, and again, keep that wood surface clear of any extra glue. Get it wiped off. Get the wheel put on the way you like it. Glue gets on the head of the hammer when you do that because the glue will come out. So if you're not careful, you can make a mess. And there you go. So you want to make sure the wheels are all free spinning. Now's the time when the glue is still setting, or before the glue is set, for you to adjust the wheels in any way. If you need to pry them out a little bit, if you need to make them a little closer in, make sure they fit the way you like them to fit. I wish I could give you better instructions on the axle, but it's going to depend almost solely on the width of wheel that you have. So there you have it.